a block or two. And I can tell you that the transportation improvement plan, year 1 and 2 are usually, was I not talking loud enough?
They were off.
I could tell. Year 1 and 2 are usually, are pretty strong, and they only really get adjusted if we come under budget on our bids, where the bids come in very low and we've got extra stuff to do, or if council dedicates more money, or if MDOT increases the funding to us, and we try to slide projects up. So that local heavy rehab is kind of a placeholder for right now. And then the next major project that we want to do is 8th Street, which is east of US 31. So from 31 to Hopkins, and then Hopkins to Davis, which is going down the hill. We actually have, that area needs storm sewer also, and if you've driven on it, that's one of probably our worst major street right now. So we've had that in our plan for a long time, waiting for the funds to catch up with it. The one thing that kept us from doing that right now, or in the current years, was that we needed to fund storm sewer to get there. And the closest place that we can access the storm sewer is down on Davis Street. So as part of the wet weather corrective action program, we've included just a pipeline that goes from Davis Street up that hill to Hopkins that'll set it up so that when the funds are available in the major street funds, then we've got a place to take that water and drain that back out. Any questions on 2021? So 2022 includes reconstruction of Quincy and Cleveland Street.
Would that be at the beginning of the year, like in the spring, that you're envisioning that happening?
Well, the budget starts in July 1st.
Can I clarify one thing here, just to make sure there's no confusion? The TIP is set up in a calendar year, because the construction season is April through September, and it spans our fiscal year exactly. So we do the tip based on a calendar year or a construction year, and then we estimate when those might get done. So we have to split the cost between a couple of fiscal years. So rather than try to show just the piece that's going to be in one fiscal year or another on this presentation, we show it by calendar year.
Yeah, and if they're smaller projects, we try to front load the engineering maybe in a budget cycle ahead, so that we can start on that to try to take advantage of the timeframes for the construction. But when we reconstruct Quincy Street, obviously that pavement is in poor condition. There's also some sanitary sewer upgrades that need to be completed. And one of the biggest issues with that street is the street is higher than the sidewalks and higher than the adjoining properties on the north and south side of it. So what we've envisioned is dropping that street down in order to get positive drainage to the street away from the homes, and so we're not flooding out yards. When you do that, you get closer to the water main, and the water main needs the proper amount of depth. Otherwise, you've got freezing issues. So this also anticipates replacing the water main along that stretch. And I know that's been a priority for members of the community for a long time, but it's catching up with being able to pay for the utilities, not just the pavement. So that's planned for 2022.
Okay. So there's no realistic way to move it up, is what you're saying?
The only way you can move that up is if you moved it up 1 year and then move the Jackson Van Buren water main loop back.
Another thing that council should be aware of, these prices or costs on here are for the road portion of these projects. So for instance, the Quincy and Cleveland project shows at about 557, but it's a lot more expensive project, and I don't know what the total number is. So what we're intending on doing, which doesn't show on this sheet, is closer to $1 million, is we're going to be bundling up a number of these water projects, and probably going after some low-interest loans through the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. And in order to make that, you have to construct those within 3 years, so you've got to package those together and get that stuff in, and so you can get those low-interest loans to do that. It'll be paid off by water and sewer revenues, the piece that's water and sewer. and we don't have to necessarily raise rates beyond our normal scheduled increase to do that, but we have to get the money up front to be able to fund those. So that's the intention with several of these street projects that have a water component, is to bundle those projects together
Okay,
in a future year.
Which means we gotta time them too. It's tricky trying to time all that water work being done at the same time. We've only got a couple years we can spend those funds. So it really, we leverage a lot of money in all these roads, especially 19 and 20. We're either between grants or other projects or water sewer. So we're really stretching the dollars, but it is a absolute nightmare trying to manage all the timing of these grants and funds but it's, I mean, it's definitely worth it, obviously, because we can stretch our dollars a long ways.
mhm,
19 and 20 are almost all leveraged. Everything's almost leveraged with the exception of probably that little section of Tamarack,
Yeah, the $20,000
the $20,000.
of the 3 million.
Just as a timing, you know, you've got a lot of the main streets of the north sides all tied up during that same period of time. Is that gonna be staggered somehow, and how is that gonna work? So you got everything from Memorial Drive in Washington. How is traffic gonna be routed to kind of compensate for all of that?
When we design those projects, we, if there's major impacts like that, we're doing a whole neighborhood, we can create stages. And typically, we typically put clauses in that, for an example, when we do 12th Street this spring, we put a clause in that contract that there has to be one-way gravel going to the west,
Yeah.
maintained throughout the project. And that's just because there's no other outlet to it.
Right, for those houses?
Right. So, yeah, project by project, we take a look at that during the design phase. So again, in 2022, we've got a placeholder for some heavy rehab. We're planning on a crush and shape on 12th Street between Oak and west of Oak. I always call it Locust, but basically 12th Street will be brand new, really from Kosciuszko all the way to Tamarack Street, with the exception of that little portion. And that's the that's a portion that the school extended as their driveway when the school was built, and built it to our local street standards, but it is now on we brought it into our system as a major street, and because of the traffic volumes and the loads that it's carrying. And if you drive on that section, you'll appreciate why there's different standards, why you use curb and gutter. The edges of it are already shot. I mean, that road needs to be improved today. But we're also trying to leverage some grant funds for that one, if I recall.
Yeah, there's a chance that could actually get pulled up to go with the 8th Street project with the MDOT Category F grant. So it's again the same game, we're trying to bundle things together, leverage dollars from the state. So, but that is another potential Cat F project.
We are leaving no stone unturned on how we can leverage this with grant funds, with other projects. The last project on that list is another example of that. Reconstructing, or actually it could be a heavy rehab on Washington Street from Memorial to Monroe, and then reconstructing Memorial Drive from 31 to Washington.
I have a question on it.
Yep.
I thought, and if I may have this wrong, I thought I heard you say, and this was maybe months ago, that there was gonna be some work just north of the bridge.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Okay, so I was saying, you were hoping that you could get some money to repave
Yep.
Memorial Drive.
So just as an example, I mean, Washington Street it's not in terrible condition right now. It's actually a candidate for a mill and fill, or a heavy rehab. And the last time that was done was probably 12, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
Through an MDOT grant.
2005 or 6, I think.
Through an MDOT grant, and it did the same thing, but that asphalt doesn't last forever. So we're anticipating by 2023 that road condition will be in much worse condition, and we already know Memorial Drive is ready for reconstruction. MDOT paved that during a detour, but they did a mill and they did a fill, but the base underneath it is not sufficient. So that's why that new asphalt, after 3 years, started cracking and cracking and cracking. That's why there's so many potholes there. You can actually see some clay coming up through it. Last week we met with the MDOT Regional Director, and I've previously met with one of their design engineers and let them know that they let us know in 2023 the Maple Street or the Memorial Bridge is going to have some heavy structural rehab. They're going to do some approach span replacements and some steel upgrades. So it'll be an extended detour through the city, and so we've approached them and let them know that these routes are going to need to be upgraded. They're going to need a plan for it and a budget for it. We don't have any guarantees on that, but we're anticipating that we can leverage some of the MDOT work to upgrade those.
Okay.
So along the same lines that we were just talking about with the water main upgrades and bundling the water main projects, Washington Street has a 4-inch water main that's undersized. There's sections of it that have split, broke, and so we've got a couple dead ends on it. There's some valves that are inoperable because they're old cast valves. And then we also have a dead end coming off of Taylor Street. So what we've tried to include in the utility budgets, once we get through the Jackson Van Buren water main loop and the utility upgrades on Cleveland and Quincy, this would be the next investment in water, would be to upgrade that stretch and do it ahead of when we hope that MDOT will rebuild that for us.
Would that be before 23?
We have it budgeted for 2022 in the transportation improvement plan. Try to get that done ahead of when MDOT does their bridge stuff. We're also, and this is on your council agenda next Tuesday, we're also applying for some maintenance work on the Maple Street Bridge for 2022, so that while we've got that section of Washington Street closed for construction, we can do the repair and maintenance on Maple Street Bridge at the same time. And we know that we can leverage MDOT local bridge funding because that's part of their detour route when they fix their bridge. So we're trying to leverage everything we can.
Now, is Memorial going to require anything with sewer and water?
The water definitely has to be upgraded from a 4-inch to an 8-inch. And the sewers, there's some rehab through the wet weather, some lining, but other than that, no. That's got good base, so it's kind of trenching in the water main, putting the ag base back in, and then new pavement. And then 2023, you can see how all of these try to fit together, and anything that upsets the apple cart ripples down. So we update this thing multiple times every year. Every time a project's completed, the funds change. When you get out to 2023, it's really hard to forecast how much water and sewer money we're gonna have, what the street funds are gonna look like, and then how to identify what candidates are appropriate that far out.
So in 2023, is Cypress Street going to be part of that? Is that orange because Cypress Street's going to be worked on, or is that just the color of 31 on the map?
Can you go to the map?
On mine,
It's orange.
in mine, it looks like almost the same color.
That's because it's a different type of structure, yeah. Now, when we met with MDOT last week, they did say that when they do the work on the M55 bridge, to replace that bridge, they're doing about $2 million to upgrade that detour route. It's a 13-mile detour route through Manistee and Filer Townships. And they did say that there's a portion of 31 to south of the river that they're planning to do joint repairs in, and I think that was in 2021.
It's 2 years out, 3 years out.
So they're trying to program money for that, just like we do in our tip. And then they've submitted a project to fully reconstruct 31 from just north of the 31 bridge all the way out to M55. where they would completely remove the composite pavement. It's actually asphalt pavement over concrete, and they would do a full reconstruction. But they said that's contingent on full funding that the governor's plan has put out there, and if it kind of survives all the other priorities. But that, I think they said that was a $17 million project.
You use the word pie in the sky.
Now, I know that asphalt's cheaper than concrete, but would there ever be, are we approaching the cost of asphalt versus concrete, a time when we might think about doing some of these streets in concrete?
They actually have a pretty similar lifespan cost. You know, concrete will last 50 years. Asphalt may last 15, 20 if you're doing the asset management techniques to it. So I haven't looked at exactly what they are, but the life cycle costs are about the same. The difference with the concrete is you got to pay it all up front. And so it's a much bigger capital investment that lasts you longer, where the asphalt, we've got some techniques to pass that on. And we've got so many needs, I don't think we're there.
Yeah.
I think you find on local streets where the traffic's a lot lower, that the asphalt will kind of win that little game of, life cycle costs. If you talk to the asphalt people, their life cycle costs are a little better. You talk to the concrete people, their life cycles are better. But that's why you see it a lot more on highways where they really get loaded heavy, and that's where concrete kind of can jump ahead, because that just heavy impact requires you to have 12, 15 inches HMA asphalt to be similar to 8 inches of concrete, and you start washing out on prices. But local streets that aren't loaded that deep, you're only putting 3.5, 4 inches down, it's hard to justify the concrete to beat that.
Are we responsible for like filling the potholes and that kind of maintenance on 31?
Yes.
So like the areas around Arthur Street, those are ours to fill and take care of?
Yes, the state provides us a budget every year of what that is supposed to cost. I will tell you, we've already exceeded the pothole budget from MDOT within 6 months of this year. So we actually just had this conversation today. We've notified them that it's going higher, and they, as those maintenance costs come up, just like we do, they recognize that, and then they start to start budgeting for capital improvements because the maintenance costs start to elevate.
Because we've seen a lot of the articles where this is probably one of the worst years for potholes, and it's apparent in some of the 31 in some areas. So.
Yeah. Yeah, the primary contract for MDOT maintenance is the snow plowing and salting, and then they've got a small budget for us to sweep it and clean it, which we've been doing the last couple days. They give us very little money for doing the sidewalk along there, and they give us no money for upgrading the sidewalks. And then we've got patching and that sort of thing. And then there's a separate contract to operate the 31 bridge.
Anything else? Thank you. Okay. Dale Cooper.
What?
Councilman, do you have anything you'd like to discuss about the budget?
Nope.
Linda Beaton, do you have anything further?
Obviously, we're not going to discuss the DDA budget at this point.
No, we're gonna do the DDA, if council agrees, we'll do it on the 16th, DDA budget.
If council agrees.
If council doesn't fight me about it, we'll do it on the 16th.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's deserving of a lot of time and a lot of advance notice, the DDA, so that they can be here.
Okay.
So we'll do an invite to the DDA?
We can.
Yep.
Mr. Goodspeed.
Like you guys did it again.
What?
Don't it?
I just have a question on the municipal marina. It's really kind of like the only area where we really just don't seem to have a plan for, or at least not visible, how are we gonna get to the break even? And maybe it exists, I just haven't been able to put my finger on it. And, you know, again, some of my questions are, you know, I know a lot of the expense comes from the actual marina support facility, the building itself, and some of the costs associated with that. And I talked to you, Mr. Taylor, before. Is there any way of sharing some of that cost with the city? Because the city uses literally the top half of that building as public bathroom meeting space, and I don't really see where there's any direct connection with the marina.
So I can address that, I think. The general fund is already supporting the marina fairly heavily.
Right.
The level of the administration fee, which the marina pays back to the general fund for accounting and bookkeeping and all those other things, you know, Tim's time as the harbor master, Mark Hansen's time as the facility manager, who's paid for out of the general fund, spends a lot of time at the marina. So they're already getting some savings there. All of the rental for that room goes to the marina.
Okay.
So you do have costs from the DPW and Parks Department to clean those bathrooms, definitely, that's something. But we try to not charge the marina for those extras because we know that they're struggling. And you can tell from the bottom line here where it shows the total marina here. I mean, there's not much margin there for error. You know, on an enterprise that has that type of a budget. So, you know, we're hopeful that when the new docks go in conjunction with the newer building, that's gonna help with, you know, with driving boater traffic if we publicize that. But there's three things that we can't control about the marina. One is the weather, two is the gas prices, and three is the fishing. And those are the three biggest drivers of the boat traffic at our marina. If we have a hot spring and it stays hot all summer, gas prices are reasonable, and then in the fall, if fishing's good, we're gonna have a good year. But if you get a real cold spring, and, you know, we don't have a lot of boats in the marina anyway in June, but June is kind of what I'm referring to. If you have a hot June, then maybe you get a few more boats in. And that's just really difficult. I know Chief has done a really good job on minimizing the staffing there to the extent you can, and we typically have kept that budget very flat on the personnel costs. The building is in good shape, the docks will be in good shape, so we don't have a lot of capital expenditure needs, although at some point, we might have to replace that underground fuel tank. The insurance company notified us that they start to charge a higher premium for that once it's over 25 years old, which it's approaching, but I don't think they realize that we have a pretty high-tech double-walled tank system. So we're gonna try to provide them that information so we can, you know, it's got a longer than a 25-year lifespan, and it's monitored and all that. But there's no easy question to that. I know that they've tried marketing more, different channels, different avenues, and I think the best thing would be more word-of-mouth advertising, and, you know, we're starting to get a few more restaurants downtown. That's a huge draw for boaters to have good quality choices for dining. We already have a lot of nice shops downtown, so I think I think we'll get there eventually, but I don't see it servicing its debt until that debt's paid off. It just isn't gonna happen. Once that debt is out of the way, then it'll be a fairly a break-even thing, but it's not gonna be generating huge cash to fund future projects necessarily, maybe a little bit.
Ed, what does it cost to rent the marina, the meeting room?
Well, I'm glad I have Laura here tonight because she manages that.
City residents pay $120 for the day, non-city residents pay $150 for the day.
Okay. Now, is there a sign on it to say, hey, you can rent this if you're a city resident? Is there a visible sign
On the
building?
outside of the building, or no, there isn't
There
anything.
isn't.
We do have some flyers and things downstairs and a poster
Right.
Is it on letting our people know.
Have some kind of
Yes.
It is.
a sign on the front.
Mhm.
You can see the budget proposes $9,000 in rental income, and we actually had 11,000 in 2017, 2018. So, I mean, that's revenue that wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago because we didn't have that room to rent.
Right.
So,
No, I think I think a sign though, because people walking by, go, hey, 120 a day if I'm a city resident, I can rent this. I think that would be a good thing to have. Just a small thing, but it might generate you some more revenue.
Anything else, sir?
Nope.
Nope. Covered it? So are we done with the budget?
Are we going over appropriations or anything?
No, this is this is the
Okay.
part of the budget. Done with the budget.
Okay, but we're gonna, okay.
Okay. Done with the budget? Okay, we're done with the budget. This part of it. Next week, we'll talk about the DDA. Riverbank erosion.
Yes, I wanted to take some time tonight to talk to council about some problems we're experiencing. We're seeing shoreline erosion along the river channel, as well as we had significant damage to our river walk over the winter due to the high water levels, the ice, and the wave action. So this is just a preliminary. We're gonna do a more in-depth presentation to council at a later date and start talking about our options for taking care of the problem. So I'll turn it over to Jeff.
So I just grabbed some photos that we had snapped as we were seeing this. If you can see at the top of the picture, this is actually looking to the east. The boat launch is at the top of the picture. So we just noticed that there was a large portion of that bank that sloughed off the top, probably a week and a half ago. We've put some snow fence up around that to keep people from getting close to that edge. But I don't remember how long that was, 100 feet, 150 feet. It's all riprap underneath that. When I say riprap, it's actually busted concrete and old curbs and stuff that the city had placed there years and years ago. But that's a pretty substantial section. These photos, zoom in on those if you can. This is a section of the Riverwalk,
Holy cow.
actually on the other side, east of the boat launch. And we've had erosion. Some of the other pictures will show the erosion more clear. But the rocks that you see on the left-hand side of the picture, just at the base of the bank, was about $20,000 of protection that we put in there 2 years ago because we had some erosion at the bottom. And all we did was put stone where the washouts had occurred. What we're seeing now is that the wave action has been tremendous and actually devastating. And when this the damage occurred at two different pieces. There's one piece that'll show up in a picture that's coming up. There was a section that lifted up and was broken, and we actually started repairing that in-house and closed the Riverwalk late last fall. And then when the weather hit and we were not able to finish it, this damage here occurred from wave action and pushing ice. It actually pushed chunks of ice up underneath it, lifted it and snapped it off the foundations. And we've made an insurance claim on that. I don't know if we've heard anything on that yet. Let me click to the next one.
How can you keep that open for pedestrians?
It's not open.
It's completely closed off.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to let you know, because we do have sections that broken. And I mean, the railings are all broke. The damage is more substantial than, you want me to take that over?
No, it was giving me trouble now, it's working. Do you want this one zoomed in?
So this one actually gives you a better indication of the bank erosion at the base of the bank. 2.5 years ago, the grass would have went right up to the Riverwalk. So you can see that it's kind of eroding it, eating away at the bottom of that. That's just a longer view. Now, the critical thing of where the erosion is happening at the bottom of that is we've got those structural walls up above it, and those structural walls support those parking spaces at the overlook. And I just noticed yesterday that it looks like some of that wall, it may be compromised, and so we've got the engineers that are gonna look at that. There's a little bowing to it, and there's some subsidence of the soils behind it, and it could be because the foundation down below is giving way.
Talk about that one, no?
Yep, next one.
Now, how far back is it closed? Is all this section that we're looking at closed?
I believe we have that closed from Tamarack to Cherry Street, because that's the next access point. And we also have some trees that have this is coming up. There's some trees that have fallen on the bank by the net shed pier. We knew that had happened, and that net shed pier, the pilings had heaved. That's actually part of the contract when we fixed the marina docks. There's some damage to the Riverwalk that'll actually get fixed under that contract.
Okay.
And then this weekend, between Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, there's sections of city property, the stretch, or the houses that are between Tamarack and the Armory, basically. The city, the lots were platted, and they go close to the top of the bank. It's actually city property from the top of the bank to the water. So most of this erosion, and if you just toggle through those, Ed.
These look like they're at the top of the bank, though.
There's portions of the top of the bank that are sliding in, but the erosion is occurring at the bottom, which is then causing the top of it to come down. So certainly these property owners, you can see that's a very big portion of their backyard about to slide down that hill. What's concerning is, number one, it's city property, and we've got some utilities close to that area. But number two, the river walk is down at the bottom of that, and as that stuff slides down, it could cause further damage.
Now, is that tree on city property, or is that homeowner's property?
If it was on the homeowner's property, it's sliding onto the city's property for sure. I think it's a city tree now.
If we had terraced, I know that would have been expensive, but if we had terraced that slope, would that have prevented this from happening, do you think?
Well, yeah, certainly, but we know that the federal navigation channel that goes through the river, when it crosses or bisects this portion of the river, they do not maintain the full width of that navigation channel. In fact, they've got a prohibition on it.
They
So I'm
prohibit on what?
On dredging,
Okay,
and I'm guessing it's because of the steep banks and the unstableness of those banks, so. Can you get all fancy on this now? So the erosion is real. We were talking about in our staff meeting today, when the water gets low in the Great Lakes, then you hear everybody talking about the need to dredge. When the water comes high, like it's been the last couple of years, and it's gonna come up again this year, then erosion becomes a real significant issue. The city had compelled the Corps of Engineers to do a wave study of the Inner Harbor. I don't remember what that was, 2005, 8, some time ago, but over the same issues. It was a concern about erosion and the wave action. So we plan to reach out to the Corps of Engineers again this week and start some conversations to see whether or not they'll have some assistance for us. Or.
And as Jeff mentioned, we have contacted our insurance company about the damage to the Riverwalk. So we're not gonna move on any of those repairs until we hear on whether we're covered or not. And then we would consider that. But of greater importance is it seems like the erosion obviously is moving to the east. And we're gonna have to, that's why we need to have discussions with the Corps of Engineers to find out what options is best suited to address this, because it's not we can fix what we see today, but then next year or the year after, we're just gonna be chasing it down. So we're gonna try to explore all options and get back with council as we get information. But we just wanted you to be aware that those two situations exist. We have done a look at it, and we're reaching out to other parties to help us think through the resolution.
are we sending out any letters to the homeowners that own property along there?
We haven't to date.
A lot of them are, or several, there could be several of them that are seasonal,
Right.
and they need to hold it. This is a hazard that's in their backyard now.
The photos that we took, that property owner was notified, correct? Yeah.
Okay,
So-
looking,
well, I do worry about people who leave it, they're
Yeah,
renting
and
their
that-
places out or whatever they're doing, and they need to be told. that this is a hazard.
Just lost half of your backyard.
Well, I know that's not
Is there a safety issue for those people? Should they be fenced, should that be fenced off, their backyards, or?
You don't want your kids running down there.
Yeah, I mean, you're at the top of a bank, so it's no different than what it was, I would say.
Are you aware of this happening like this in the past? I mean, in recent years, have there been big slides in that area where these?
I would not say recent years, but there was, in fact, we started researching some of the old files. Some of the homes where this occurred was in this area here.
Yep.
And some of the homes in here had experienced some of those same issues and ended up putting in a steel seawall to protect the toe of that bank.
Yeah, those are further down, right? A little bit further down, the steel bank ones.
Those are right in here. There's a wooden pile or a wood wall here, and then there's a steel wall in here. And if you look at the configuration of that harbor, as those big waves come down, when they hit the sheet piling here, there's no energy absorption. They just reflect and bounce. So here's where we're getting a substantial amount of damage to the riverwalk and erosion. And then we're getting some here. And everybody, if you notice when you go down to the beach, you can see that this is coming down a lot. And then that first picture that I showed you was right in this area where the old concession stand was.
So, looking into the future, we don't really have a set date when this is gonna be fixed, so that's gonna be roped off for a while. For like the tourists come this season.
Yeah, right now it's unstable, right at the edge. And depending, I mean, you're talking about, just to put some heavy armor stone in there, you could spend $500,000 to $1 million very easily just to protect the toe of that. And you'd have to go through the permitting process and come up with funding for it.
Yeah,
The Riverwalk, if the insurance, regardless of whether the insurance submits a claim on that, we'll get that fixed and open. But the protection from the erosion, that's a whole different thing.
Is the goal to have it open about the same time we get the marina back in May? Or is that too soon to
It's
tell?
too soon to tell right now, because,
Okay.
you know, it obviously, if the insurance says they're gonna cover it, you know, that adds a little bit more to the process of going through contractors and different things like.
Added to the contract that we already have with the guys that are doing the work on the marina.
That's possible.
And just.
Yeah, my staff was chomping at the bit to get going and get started on that work, but once I went down and looked at it and saw how extensive it was, then I thought we need to submit this as a claim first.
Especially if you're gonna replace the pylons, I mean, that would be out of the scope of our work, wouldn't it?
I don't think there's pilings that need to be replaced there, but it's all the superstructure of the decks.
I'm thinking about like the, tight lines for troops. I know that was a big viewing area on that, that's gonna be a bummer.
Yeah, it probably won't be fixed for that, the walkway portion of it. So, just wanted to give you that update.
And we'll provide you further information as it becomes available, but just wanted to get ahead of it a little bit.
Anything else? I want to thank staff, Mr. Taylor, for, we do those at the next meeting when we have, we do, can we do them at the next meeting, we have all the people here.
Oh, okay, sure.
I want to thank staff and Mr. Taylor for all the hard work on the budget. It looks like we have a consensus here tonight that we're going to move forward with what we have.
Okay.
And we'll work on the DDA budget on the 16th.
All right, and we will notify them.
Okay, with that, meeting adjourned.